بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام بمحمد ومن تبعهم بإحسان يوم الدين Alhamdulillah. In this video here inshallah we're going to be speaking about أفعال الخمسة. Sometimes it's also referred to as أمثال الخمسة. Whatever term you use inshallah is fine. So what is أفعال الخمسة? It's any verb regardless of the meaning of that verb. It's any verb which is in the مضارع form, which its fa'il, its do of action, is one of the following three pronouns: واو جماعة, ألف مثنى, or يا المخاطبة. So أفعال الخمسة is not referring to any specific verbs, but it's rather referring to verbs when they're attached to any of these three pronouns. And verbs that are attached with these three pronouns in the مضارع, there are 5 different possibilities. It's either going to be أنت, which is يا المخاطبة here. واو جماعة as a fa'il is used for hum and أنتم. And ألف مثنى is used as the fa'il for huma and antuma. So when I conjugate a verb with any of these 5 pronouns here, they're going to look like this. And they're always going to have the same ending. تذهبين, تخرجين, تدرسين. So the ending of all those 3 verbs were the same, which is that it has the ya al-mukhataba, the fa'il, the ya here, followed by a noon. For whom it's the same exact thing. يذهبون, تخرجون, تدرسون. We could do this with all the verbs in the Arabic language pretty much. So again, it's ending the same exact way. There's a waw jama'a, which is the fa'il, and then there's a noon. أنتم, same exact thing. تذهبون, تخرجون, تدرسون. هما, it will be the same exact thing. يذهبان, تخرجان, تدرسان, and the list goes on. And again, in all those 3 verbs I just mentioned, the common thing is that they're all being conjugated the same exact way. Their ending is the same. It has a alif muthanna as a fa'il, and then it has a noon. Antuma, same exact thing. تذهبان, تخرجان, تدرسان, and the list goes on. Yani. And again, there's a alif muthanna coming as a fa'il, and there's a noon. So what's so special about these 5 verbs? What's so special about conjugating a verb with these 3 pronouns, which is the equivalent of these 5 pronouns, yani, which ends up being 5? What's the special thing about them is that if you look at them, every single one of these has a noon at the end. Every single one of these verbs has a noon at the end. And the thing that makes these 5 verbs, if you will, common and linked is the fact that they all have that noon at the end. Because that noon at the end is a special type of noon, and it's going to have a special place, if you will, in grammar in terms of how it functions. So this noon at the end is called ثبوت النون. So the common thing in the أفعال الخمسة is that they all end with a noon, as we just saw. This noon is called ثبوت النوني. It's called ثبوت النوني. What's the special thing about ثبوت النوني is that the presence of ثبوت النون is a sign that the verb is مرفوع, while the absence of ثبوت النون is a sign that the verb is منصوب or مجزوم. So يذهبون means they are going, and it's مرفوع. Why? Because of ثبوت النون. So يذهبون and all these other 5 verbs here, or any verb that has these 3 pronouns, they're going to have their sign of i'rab for the rafa' as the noon. Instead of taking the original sign, which is the dhamma, when for example I say يذهب, يذهب means you are going, and the sign of يذهب being marfu' is a dhamma. But for these 5 verbs here, the sign of it being marfu' is not going to be a dhamma, but rather it's going to be a alamat far'iyya. It's going to be a secondary sign, which is going to be the noon. And the sign of it being not marfu', the sign of it not being marfu', i.e. being mansub or majzumun, will be the dropping of that noon. Lam yadhhabu. Yadhhabu here is majzumun because of lam, and it means they did not go. And it's majzumun, and the sign of it being majzumun, instead of it being a sukoon, it's the dropping of thubut noon. So yadhabuna became yadhabu without the noon because yadhabu here is majzumun because of lam. And if I also place yadhabu with a noun that does not take thubut noon, like anta, it would be lam tadhhab with sukoon, because tadhhabu, the sign of it being majzumun, is the original sign, which is sukoon. Likewise, the sign of it being mansubun is the original sign, which is the fatha. So that's a special thing with أفعال الخمسة. So if we break down the فعل المضارع, we can sort of break it down like this. The فعل المضارع, it can either be معرب, which means that it can take the signs of إعراب, or it can be مبني. It can be stuck, which means that it's never going to change. It's stuck in two scenarios. إذا اتصل به نون التوكيد, if it has نون التوكيد attached to it, which is something we're going to cover in later videos, so we can ignore that for now. And it's also going to be مبني, and this is important for us, if إذا اتصل به نون النسوة, if the noon of femininity is attached to it, which is a noon that you find in يكتبنا and تكتبنا, يعني هن and أنتن. This noon at the end of يكتبنا and تكتبنا is not ثبوت النون. It is not ثبوت النون. Rather, it's called نون النسوة. It's the noon of femininity, and it's to show that the verb is in the feminine, هن, they feminine, or أنتن, you feminine. So that's not really important for us right now. But the important thing for us right now is that the فعل المضارع, it can be معرب, right? Most of the time it's going to be able to take the signs of إعراب. But when it's going to be معرب, it can be معرب with the original signs العلامات النصرية, or with the secondary signs العلامات الفرعية. The primary signs or the original signs are the ضمة and the فتحة and the كسرة, and that is with all the pronouns except for the أفعال الخمسة. So أنتِ, أنتِ, أنتم, هم, أنتما, هما, and نون النسوة, which we just covered here. While it's going to take العلامات الفرعية, the secondary sign, which is the ثبوت النون, if it's الأفعال الخمسة, the 5 special nouns, or the 5 special pronouns, or the 5 special verbs I just talked about. So visualization of this is what we have right here. So the فعل المضارع can be معرب with the original signs, which is when it's مرفوع, it takes a ضمة like تذهب. When it's منصوب, it takes a فتحة like لن تذهب. When it's مجزوم, it takes a سكون like لم تذهب. While on the other hand, it can be معرب, but with the secondary signs, which is when it's part of أفعال الخمسة, which is that when it's مرفوع, I was going to take ثبوت النون, يذهبون, تذهبون, تذهبين, تذهبان, يذهبان. Or it's going to be mansub with حذف ثبوت النون. حذف means dropping. حذف ثبوت النون with the dropping of ثبوت النون. لن يذهبوا, لم تذهبي, لم يذهبا, لن تذهبا, and then this goes on. Or it's going to be مجزوم with حذف ثبوت النون, also the dropping of ثبوت النون. لم يذهبوا, لم تذهبي, and then this goes on. So I'm going to be able to know whether it's مجزوم or منصوب, not by whether it has a فتحة or a sukun, but rather what comes before it. Because the sign of it being mansub or majzumun is the same thing, which is the dropping of thubut nun. Well, I know that I will know that it's marfu' if it has thubut nun, because that's the sign of it being marfu'. So if we break down a conjugation of a verb and we look at it in terms of whether it takes whether it's mu'rab or mabni, and whether it takes the original signs or the secondary signs, it will look something like this here. So now we're taking ذهب as the example, or we're going to conjugate ذهب in the marfu mansub majzum. So, and we're going to look at whether it's going to be mabni stuck, the verb itself, or whether it's going to be mu'arab but with the secondary signs, and whether it will be mu'arab but with the primary signs. And this example here can be used with any verb in the Arabic language. ذهب is just an example. So huwa is blue because it takes the original signs. So يذهب is مرفوع في الضمة, يذهب is منصوب في الفتحة, and يذهب is مجزوم with a sukun. Why is it like this? Because it's not part of أفعال الخمسة. هي, same thing. تذهب, تذهب, تذهب. But now we have the secondary علامات الفرعية, the secondary signs that come to play, because we have هما and we have hum. هما masculine, يذهبان, يذهبا, يذهبا. So here يذهب and يذهب, instead of taking the fatha or the sukun, they take the hadf thubut nun. They're dropping the thubut nun because it's mansub and majzum. هما feminine, تذهبان, تذهبا, تذهبا. Same exact thing. هم يذهبون, يذهبوا, يذهبوا. Same thing. So all of these three here are part of أفعال and خمسة, so they take the secondary signs. Now hunna, as we covered, is mabni, meaning that its ending is never going to change. The noon that you see at the end is not part of thubut nun, but rather it's noon niswa, the noon to show that it's feminine. So yadhabana, yadhabana, yadhabna, never changes. Unlike huwa, hiya, huma, huma, hum, where they're mu'arab, but some of them take the original sign, while some of them take the secondary signs. Hunna is always going to be mabni. That's for the third person. Let's go to a second person. أنت تذهب 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 takes the original signs. The rest takes either the secondary signs or it's مبني. أنت secondary signs, تذهبين تذهبي تذهبي, again the noon went away to show that it's either منصوب or مجزوم. أنتما تذهبان تذهبا تذهبا. أنتما in the feminine and in the masculine in the second person is the same. So تذهبان تذهبا تذهبا. أنتم تذهبون تذهبوا تذهبوا. أنتن is مبني, so it's تذهبنا تذهبنا تذهبنا, it never changes. So again, we can see here that on the screen here, we have some that take the original signs, which is أنت. Then we have some that take the original signs, which is أنتِ, أنتما, and أنتم. And then we have one that takes none of these, which is مبني, which is أنتن, like هن. Now we only have the first person, which is أنا نحن. أنا and نحن both take the original signs of الإعراب. So أذهب أذهب أذهب, نذهب نذهب نذهب. And that, in a general sense, is الأفعال الخمسة and what's special about them. So the special thing about الأفعال الخمسة is that they take ثبوت النون to show that it's مرفوع, and the sign of it being منصوب or مجزوم is the dropping of ثبوت النون. What's أفعال الخمسة? أفعال الخمسة is any verb that's conjugated with these 5 pronouns. أنت, هما, أنتم, هما, أنتما. And يعني the equivalent of these when it's attached to a verb is the يا المخاطبة, واو الجماعة, or ألف المثنى. جزاك الله خيرا for listening. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.